give a warm welcome to the hosts of the Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins. Welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending. I'm Brennan Klein, and I'm here with my co-host. Who are you?
I am Tim Brayton, Brennan Klein.
Thank you, Tim Brayton. Anyway, so we are here in this bounteous month of December. This is technically supposed to be our first episode of the month. We're going to be discussing...
Spiritually, it is our first episode of the month, let's say.
Yes, it is. And we're getting into the December spirit. Merry December.
Yes, indeed.
We had all the Patreon folks vote on a Christmas horror movie for us to cover, and they voted for 1989's Elves.
They sure did, and I gotta say, I love having Patreons. They are good and fine people. They just don't like us. They just persistently don't like us. I don't get why.
Because it's so much more fun to watch us suffer than it is to watch us talk about how The Haunting is a good movie.
I guess. And it's not like we put up like good options, because Christmas horror as a body is typically pretty horrible, to be fair.
And also we were trying to get to ones that you maybe hadn't covered, or at least hadn't covered recently or fully, and that's also difficult to
because
arrange.
I've reviewed the good ones already, by which I mean 1974's Black Christmas.
Yeah, pretty much. And you've done the Silent Night franchise, except for the remake, which I'm gonna put back in the running next year because I think that movie is worth talking about because it's kind of wild.
So you're talking about the one that just came out, right?
Oh, no. There's a movie called Silent Night that came out this year, but that's unrelated.
Well, that's what I was going to clarify, because like I've heard that it is both is and is not a remake, and the plot does not sound like a remake. So it's good to hear that that's the case.
No, there is a movie called Silent Night from 2012 that is a remake. But the one from 2021 is not a remake. It is its own. It is just a movie called Silent Night.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, no worries. And especially like the year has the exact same numbers, just in a different order too. So it's not handy for the discourse. But yeah, I did see that new Silent Night. It is not a movie you want to watch if you still have feelings about the pandemic, and I don't know why you wouldn't. And I mean, just to regurgitate my Letterboxd review, that movie did not meet a tone it didn't love. It's really all over the place, and it does not mesh itself together very well.
I am almost certainly going to be watching it in the next few days, but I am not looking forward to it.
Do you feel compelled to? Because I feel like it's such a quiet release.
I feel oddly compelled to. Like, it is a quiet... I'm not going to probably give it a full review, but I want to see it. I want to see this movie that apparently everyone finds very unwatchable.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of good people in it, and Jojo Rabbit is in it.
I mean, that's not a plus. I'm not Carrie, but thank you for the...
No, I mean,
thank you for the heads up.
Like, I mean, I liked the kid.
No, the kid is fine. I'm just,
I know.
I don't feel like Jojo Rabbit is a cultural touchstone that makes me like, ooh, the kid from Jojo Rabbit, that's going to raise emotions in me that I want to have raised.
Well, fair enough. I'll be interested to hear what you think if you end up seeing it. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that movie. We're here to talk about...
We are not. Is it clear that I'm trying to avoid talking about Elves?
Well, then I think we should give the people what they want, and I'll manacle you to talking about Elves.
I'm so excited.
Directed by, auteur Jeff Mandel.
I mean, he wrote and directed, right? He is an auteur.
Yeah, he wrote and directed and did that several times over until I think 1998, where there's a hard break.
And also, I believe, did some of the makeup work, if I was reading the end credits correctly.
Oh, I should have looked that up. I'm not 100% certain about that, but it does seem like the work of a mad genius, perhaps.
It more to the point seems like the work of a production team where people had to double up because they didn't have enough money to hire people.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, I don't mean to like come into this with the wrong energy, because this is not like a necessarily a bad good gem. There is enough complete incoherent nonsense that it kind of kept me buoyed throughout, but it's not one that I think I'll revisit.
It's very watchable because it is such a gonzo cuckoo bird experience.
But okay, let's talk about the plot, which is a good summation of.
Let us do so.
Oh my god. Do you want to start? Because I think I did plot last episode.
I think you did too. I can try. There's a lot going on here. I don't actually have the cast list in front of me, so I'm going to riff for just a second while I pull up the cast.
I have
list.
the two leads who are the only important people.
I mean, there are at least 3 or 4 important people, I would say.
That's fair.
But so we have a situation where there is a teenage girl living in Kirsten. And who is Kirsten played by?
Julie Austin, who is no other notable credits.
Good. Well, shock.
Yeah.
So Kirsten and her friends they're very edgy. You see, they're sort of like cool and mean spirited, like tough girls, and they're gonna go out into the woods and they're gonna do a little anti-Christmas ritual because they're just so hard edged and punk, man. And while they're doing this ritual involving a book and some very sort of weirdly erotic drawings that she's stolen from her grandfather's library.
And one of them she drew from a dream she had about a woman
that's right.
with Art Deco boobs, as she describes them.
Which was a phrase that was not correct, but I like the phrasing so much that I was willing to even though they are not Art Deco boobs, they're just like boobs with lines on them. But I liked the phrase. Mm-hmm. But so they perform this like we hate Christmas boo ritual, and in the process of doing so, Kirsten accidentally cuts her hand, and she bleeds onto the ground, and then the ground starts throbbing as though some sort of horrible small creature, an elf, perhaps. We don't know this yet, but we have indications that there might be elves.
Yeah, and perhaps Jeff Mandel had watched Hellraiser right before writing the script.
That doesn't seem unlikely, shall we say? So she accidentally bleeds out while performing this sort of neo-pagan ritual. Up comes an elf, and at this point, I'm expecting a sort of Gremlins-esque creatures start attacking suburbanites during Christmas. Like that felt like the direction we were heading.
It sure does, doesn't it?
It does for 5 minutes. Well, and then
this movie doesn't remain the same movie for 20 minutes at a stretch.
That's also correct because somewhere right around now we go to the mall or the department store, I guess it's not a mall, where Kirsten is employed. And now we get to meet the sort of sad sack ex-cop played by Grizzly Adams, Dan Haggerty, who has become an alcoholic and just this sort of down-rent, disreputable figure. And he's kind of like looking for a job. And I'm skipping ahead at least a few minutes here, but he becomes the Santa Claus of this store after the previous Santa Claus very, very strangely and inexplicably decides to demand a blowjob from Kirsten in front of all the children who are lined up to sit on his lap and ask for presents. So we have these multiple plots going on. Not that Dan Haggerty ends up being really a plot. He's just kind of like a character hanging around on the edges of the film.
Yeah, and a character who seems like Kurt Russell had a baby with Roddy Piper's character from They Live.
Yes.
Like very down on his luck, but also very flowing, gorgeous, kind of graying auburn hair.
Well, you're not going to take that beautiful Grizzly Adams hair and be like, you need to look like a bum. No, you're gonna lean into it because that's why he cast Grizzly Adams.
What a man. Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, the elf starts like attacking Kirsten and her family. And this is triggered perhaps it's just a coincidence. I could not quite tell Kirsten's mom decides to drown the family cat and then bury it.
I think that's just Kristen's mom is an evil
I think it
piece of shit.
is too, but then what? It's like it's very very weird moment. Very clearly, just to be like, we're gonna start amping up the stakes right away.
Kristen's mom is a magnetic character.
She is easily my favorite character in the film.
Yeah, she is
played
up
by Deanna Lund.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. If you're speaking of important characters, yeah, she's made up like a Bratz doll.
Yes, that's a perfect way of describing it.
Thank you. And she hates her daughter with such a fiery passion that her friends assume that she's her stepmother.
Right?
Which is such a hilarious thing. Anyway, sorry, continue.
So the mother kills the cat, and why not do that? And also, I didn't even mention the first moment where I just felt like deeply unsettled by this movie. Kirsten has like a 9-year-old brother, 10.
Yeah, he's the
small
true gremlin
small
of this movie.
small child, who is introduced perving on her in the shower, and the dialogue that directly follows this is I forget exactly what lines of dialogue. I didn't write them down, but we are introduced.
I believe I have it committed to memory. You have fucking big tits, and I'm going to tell everyone at school.
Yes, thank you. They have decided that the cool, funny thing to do will be to have this 10-year-old just say "fuck" repeatedly over the course of this motion picture, which is certainly not, shall we say, the highest form of comedy. It is a gesture I've seen made in other films. I tend to always find it somewhat off-putting, but when you combine it with the incestuous, porny, leering shower scene that doesn't actually show us anything sort of vibe, it's just very filthy.
It's deeply unsettling.
I feel like I am coated in grime at this point in the movie.
Yes,
and we're like 8 minutes into the movie.
Exactly, but it's still unfortunately the second highest comedic peak of the film.
I don't disagree. So anyway, so the cat is dead. The brother's a perv. The sister is this, just nasty piece of work. Santa Claus is a disreputable Dan Haggerty type. And so the elf begins to start attacking the family and start killing people. And flash forward a bit, just because I'm not quite sure how to get to it without just kind of going like, okay, so we just need to skip ahead. Turns out, Grandpa used to be a German in the 1940s, shall we say, and he wants to bring about the Fourth Reich by having he and his Nazi buddies use elves as breeding stock, or maybe as their like spiritual leaders. But the point being,
something about the genetic code of the master race is inside the elves, like their little
something. Yes,
like just kind of like a keepsake box for
yeah.
Aryan genetics.
And it's very much, it's part of the, which I actually thought was a cool gesture that I was really happy the film made. As we know, the Nazis were like super into the occult and sort of German mythology, and there was this like fixation in higher circles of the Nazi party of using kind of dark magic to try and win, and hence we get things like Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I think it's a cool hook that hasn't really been used well enough in horror cinema. This is not using it well, but it is using it extensively, because it basically does involve like the elves are sort of the Nazis like army question
mark. Because they do frequently reference multiple elves, even though there is only one in the movie.
There is only the one elf. And I don't know if we're to the point where we want to start ladling out spoilers yet, but there's
Let's
a
do
doozy.
it. I vote.
There's
Let's
a
do it.
doozy. So it turns out Grandpa has arranged all of this so that Kirsten and the elf may couple, impregnating her with the leader of the future Reich because of the elf's DNA and Kirsten's very special DNA. And he has very careful.
Sorry, I believe Kirsten's DNA came from. Didn't the grandfather sire her with his own daughter? Is that?
Oh, I was just going to get to the me
okay.
most exciting part of this film.
Sorry.
No, you're quite correct because there's a line of dialogue in the motion picture Chinatown, which I think is one of the most in context shocking and chilling moments that 1970s cinema, just like this pure bottomed out nihilistic hopelessness of that movie, sort of wrapped up into one line, where Jack Nicholson is slapping Faye Dunaway and trying to get her to say, who is this girl? Is she your sister or your daughter? And Dunaway finally screams, she's my sister and my daughter. Powerful moment. One of the great moments in just black-hearted cinema, I think. So in Elves, the mom says to Kirsten, he's your father and your grandfather, but rather than saying it as this kind of like torn from my soul admission of horror, it's much more of a like, will you shut up, you bitch? Here, this will make you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, well, because that is Kirsten's
which is an interesting vibe to be playing.
Kirsten's mom's one wish for Christmas is that Kirsten suffers. Like that Kirsten
Yes.
is in the seventh circle of hell at all times.
This is not subtext. This is text. Yes.
It is. And we mentioned her just drowning her cat in a toilet, by the way.
Yep.
But also she shut down her daughter's savings account as punishment for going out into the woods unsupervised.
Which was remarkably excessive. And that's like the first thing she does in the movie.
Yeah, and I don't know if the little brother is telling the truth, but supposedly she's just going to give all the money to her snot-nosed brother.
It's wild. The mom is so good. But so yes, so Grandpa raped his daughter to create the genetics in his granddaughter that he needed in order for her to then be raped by an elf to bring about the Fourth Reich.
It's the circle of life.
It is. Any movie in which my one sentence logline uses the word rape twice feels like a movie where we are in a way. I think
we are firing on all cylinders.
We have a lot of movie in front of us. So as I said, it is a cuckoo bird script, and it is a deeply gross cuckoo bird script. But by God, it is not easy to get in front of it, and it is very hard to like shake it while it's going on because it's a lot.
It is so much, and the script I think is I hesitate to use the word strongest, but the script is the thing that keeps the energy up because the movie.
Yes.
Like the action or horror sequences are all incredibly inert. And this movie has more action sequences than one might be prepared for.
It does, yes. And no, I agree. Inert is a really good word for it. Like, this is direct-to-video, and it has the sort of hard limits of budget that a 1989 direct-to-video film is going to have. But it still doesn't seem to care about giving us a good time with its, like, horror elements, like violent elements. And a lot of it is just, it's really, really choosy with how much of it the elf prop it lets us see, which I assume is because the elf prop looked like shit. But we see a lot of like elf hand covered in stage blood in this movie.
I think what they had was elf hands, elf feet, and then elf like shoulders up because that's all you ever see.
That is probably correct, actually. Now that you put it that way, I don't think I'd quite assembled it in my brain because it's a hard movie to assemble in your brain. But no, that tracks with what we see of the elf, is that they perhaps did not actually have an elf torso.
Yeah, there's certainly never a full elf. They did not have it. It did not exist. And the since we're on it, the elf uh design in a still image looks decent. It looks fine. It's got this really like the way that its mouth is kind of hanging open in this kind of grotesque scream is pretty scary if you're just looking at it not in motion.
Sure, 100%.
But it doesn't move at all. Weirdly, the like when you're looking at it from behind, the neck muscles and kind of back muscles are more articulated than the face itself. And that's kind of cool, but it's a very cheap little puppet thing.
Right. And I mean, you can't criticize a cheap movie for not having the budget to make a puppet, but it's also it feels like they were so bored with the puppet that they didn't even bother pretending. And I do like my horror movies to at least pretend as far as that goes.
Yeah, you're right. They gave up really easily. Like one of the first times you see it, it's like menacing the little brother and kind of screaming in its face, and that's a pretty. That's this I'm using scare quotes, but like the scariest moment in the film. But yeah, it just the elf just keeps popping up, and it keeps just showcasing how little mobility it has at all times.
And it also feels to me like the elf is not a significant. I mean, the elf is like obviously part of the plot, but it feels like there's so much plot going on that you could remove the elf with actually very little effort. I think, and it almost feels like they didn't want this to be a movie about a killer elf, but they needed that for the marketing.
That's a great point because mostly the menace comes from these three kind of like Nazi mafiosos who are running around.
Right. Nazi mafiosos is a very perfect way of describing it.
Thank you. I have no other way to process these characters than that.
I got confused as to whether those characters were helping or hindering the grandfather fairly early on, and it took me a while to like get that sorted in my brain, which I think is a me problem more than a movie problem.
No, it's a movie problem. Where did you land? Because I think it's debatable.
I think it is debatable. I think I landed on they are trying to hinder grandfather, but I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not going to like argue for that position.
Yeah, I would say they are obviously on the elf's side. And grandfather seems to vacillate on whether he's on Kirsten's side or the elf's side.
Maybe that's the point of confusion for me. That's I think a good way of putting it.
Yeah, because like he seems to like love his granddaughter and not want this to happen, which is why he warned her not to go out into the woods. But also there are moments where he's like, "But it'll be beautiful. It's gonna be great."
Yep. And I mean, he's engineered this by having an incestual relationship with his daughter. So he's clearly not like he can't be that full of love, right? I don't know.
Yeah, and he's a Nazi.
He's a Nazi. There is oh my god, since you had the other line of dialogue committed to memory, maybe I'm lucky enough that you have this line of dialogue committed to memory. There's the one where I think Kirsten is talking to her brother and the line is something to the effect of like everything's terrible, Grandpa's a Nazi.
Oh, I don't perfectly recall that one, unfortunately.
But you recall the one to which I'm referring.
Yeah. I just your line is as close as I'd be able to get.
Okay, but either way, it's again delivered in this sort of mode, not of we are living through a sort of cosmic horror, but this sort of very suburban, like petulant teenager vibe, rather than like
the way that the performances are tossed off and casual is, if anything, more uncanny than if they had actually committed to the emotion of those scenes.
I think that's a really good point, and I feel like I especially get that with the mother, who is such a gargoyle of a character. I mean, again, she's weirdly needlessly cruel throughout the first act of the movie. As you say, she's made up to look like a Bratz doll, which I will not be able to unsee. So thank you for that point of comparison.
It's those puffy cheekbones.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like she's also using sort of like very harsh eyeliner, but I might be misremembering that. And the actress playing that character like just goes so hard in on like making her seem unreasonable and shrill and then what are we to do with that performance as the plot develops, basically? So it's very cartoony, and I think she's the sort of biggest example of it because she's such a Wicked Witch type character.
Mhm.
But it is true, I think, of every performance really, except for Haggerty, because I mean Haggerty is by just several miles
Yeah.
the most like prominent actor in this cast, and certainly the most talented member. Well, certainly, but I mean, I would feel comfortable saying Haggerty gives the in quotes best performance in this movie.
Yeah.
And so you have all of these people basically like doing caricatures rather than acting, and they're all very like unpleasant caricatures. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, especially, I mean, the mom is so compelling. Like, I could see many a baby drag queen like watching or like renting this movie and falling in love, because she's the kind of woman like Kirsten comes home from work and the mom like, if I'm recalling correctly, like barely even looks at her and just says, "You look terrible," and that's just who she is.
Yep.
But anyway, so like, yeah, we've got these completely random characters. But also the script is every moment that could just be filler is just delivering one more knockout bit of nonsense. Like whether it's Kirsten's totally underdeveloped friends talking about whether or not one of their boyfriends has a dick that's a yard long. Or there's a line that Dan Haggerty has where he's like, so the blowjob Santa who got fired and Dan Haggerty took his job, he dies when he is doing lines of coke in the back room and he gets stabbed in the dick by an elf.
Yes.
First of all, thus indulging in one of my favorite bad horror tropes, which is the idea that you can be stabbed anywhere and blood comes out of your mouth. Like humans are just like one big plastic bag of blood.
Definitely. I mean, the thing is, it's cheap to have people spit blood out of their mouth. It's expensive to show a dick prop.
Exactly. But it's just like, just I don't
Also,
know.
that you can be stabbed in your dick and die rather than bleed out painfully for like the next 14 hours. But
Yeah, it's elf Nazi magic, you know.
it's, no, for sure.
But anyway, so Dan Haggerty, when he's in that back room, he sees a clue, which is like the signet symbol of the Nazi elves or something.
It's like a 3/4 swastika with a sort of like curvy top line, basically.
Yeah, like it looks like an unfinished, like the female symbol, like the cross with the circle on top.
Right.
The circle isn't complete. It's something. But anyway, so he finds that and he's like, no, it's not worth investigating. He's like, you're not a detective anymore. You're not even a store detective. I'm like, were you that at one point? Is that a job you can have?
I was thrown by that because we've already seen him like sort of skulking around the department store. So it's like, so is that part of his backstory, or is that just like a line? I was really confused by that.
It seemed to me that was something he did used to be. But that's not something I've ever heard of.
Oh no, store detectives are a thing that exist.
Are they?
It's an old timey thing. Like if I hear that somebody had a job as a store detective, my assumption is that they were alive in the 1940s. But department stores used to have like private security. Yes.
Okay, well I know about like, I know that stores have security guards, but detective seems a little fancy of a title to me.
I mean, it is a fancy title for the sort of the king of the security guards.
Okay, fine. But anyway, so the script I'd say is constantly delivering the kind of bad movie lines that I do love to chew on and think about.
Oh
I
god,
like
the
that.
dialogue is very, very ripe in this movie.
Yeah, and there's even one single moment of production design that I think is the only genuinely on purpose funny thing in the film. So there's this huge shootout at the department store between Dan Haggerty and Kirsten and the Nazis, and they're in the gun department, and there's this little placard that says "Guns, gift ideas for mom."
That was a good joke.
Yeah, so that was the one thing that I genuinely enjoyed that the movie was delivering, but otherwise it's just like, what the fuck is going on?
It's very very confusing, and again, it's sort of one of those things where like the assumption seems to be that as long as they can keep throwing new shit at us, it doesn't really matter if it makes sense. It doesn't matter if it follows on what's gone before. We'll just be so agog that will kind of be in the moment. And to be fair to Jeff Mandel, it works.
It certainly does. And again,
I
because
was
like
not bored.
which is which is a spectacular achievement because it is on the face of it a very boring movie in the way that things are staged and shot and lit and everything. So it shouldn't be as compelling as it is.
Yeah, no, it absolutely should not. Like it's just a cheap ass, thoughtlessly thrown together direct to video movie, and I mean direct to video movies in the '80s are like the absolute bottomed out nadir of cinema. Cinema here being used as a sort of unnecessarily generous word. Um, and yet this one is just it's magnetic. Like I think it's terrible, but I found it very hard not to just kind of constantly be trying to make this into a coherent watchable object in my brain just because there's so much the nonsense is such high energy nonsense in this movie.
Yeah, and that kind of makes it accidentally into a sort of, Christopher Nolan puzzle box, Like you wanna jump in and move those pieces around.
A little bit.
Okay, but another thing that I genuinely enjoyed for badness was the costume design. Is there a costume that jumped out to you in this movie? Because I have several I can point to as glorious.
I would be lying if I said I was necessarily focused on that, but I'm very curious to hear what yours are.
Okay, well, my favorite kind of costumery moment is when the girls are well, the idea is that chopping mall style they're going to spend the night in this department store, but it kind of doesn't really pan out into anything.
I had completely forgotten that was a plot point, so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, you're welcome. But yeah, so it's like they're kind of doing their own kind of makeover montage, and the clothes they end up wearing. The least important friend, the tier 3 friend, she's wearing a purple cardigan over a yellow dress.
Oh,
Like
I
she's
do remember that.
like she's the grandmother of a Laker girl. And then Kirsten, she puts on this kind of magenta leotard with a purple tutu over it, and she's wearing that for about 20 minutes.
Oh, this that was the '80s. People wore
It was.
that.
It is. It is a choice. I mean, I would say more interesting costumes than House of Gucci for sure.
Oh, I mean, yes, because House of Gucci was obliged to limit itself to what human beings who bought fashion might wear. Elves is obliged to nothing only than its own mad whims.
Exactly. Okay. So anyway, so is there anything? What would you say is the like absolute like worst, not even like good, bad, redeemable element of Elves?
It's hard to say because I think the things that I found the most just objectionable going on while I was watching them were also in some way the most like exciting because of how just out of control trashy the movie was getting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, part of me wants to say, well, the cat killing scene adds nothing to the plot. It's unpleasant to watch because, like, it is very clear, like, embarrassingly clear, when they replace the cat with one of those little toy dogs that moves its feet forward and it's just kind of like wobbling in the pillowcase. But we are still seeing the pillowcase like wobbling its little mechanical feet while she's trying to drown it in the toilet. And I am the owner of 2 black cats, so it was not the image that I necessarily was excited to see in my Christmas movie.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's like it's such a weird character beat of like mom is such a cruel, vicious monster that she'll just kill a cat for fun. That's like, well, that's telling me a lot about mom.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like I don't want that scene to not be there, even though it's like weirdly mean spirited in an unpleasant way.
That's true. I mean, I did love that scene for that reason because everything the mom does is so like cuckoo bananas, riotously evil, like beyond the point of it's oblivion. It is so
Which
delicious.
which I took to understand was like not foreshadowing per se, but like she is mom is aware that she's a Nazi, right? Like I'm correct in assuming that she sort of is she's complicit in the like Nazi plot.
I guess she does know. I mean, obviously she would, but she does know about like her grandfather being like an evil incest man. But I don't think mom says anything about Nazi stuff or
She
elves.
doesn't, but she also doesn't seem to mind that she has fathered a child to her own father.
Yeah,
Like that doesn't seem to be a point of trauma for her. It just seems to be like
just
one of
something
those
to throw in her
things.
daughter's face. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. She's using this as a way of making her daughter feel bad.
that's
It's
a
like,
good
well,
point.
you're the result of incest, so fuck you.
Oh my god, I just want a whole movie about her. I want to know what's going on with her. I want to know why she feels the way she does.
She is certainly the character that I was most excited when she was on screen.
Oh yeah. But yeah, let's see. For me, I think the lowest point of the film is this really weird and gross conversation about consent that the girls have in the department store during their sleepover.
Oh, sure.
Um, where one of the girls is basically saying like, "I don't like to say no, so I just let them finish so as not to have a conflict." And it's just like, "Oh, okay. We just included that in this movie. Thanks, everyone." Obviously,
Which
this movie is
well, I feel like that's just part of the movie's sort of like overall veneer of scuzziness, but I didn't mean to step on
yeah.
your thought.
No, it's just like obviously this is an incredibly like rapey, non-consensual movie in general, but that moment of like hearing that come out of someone's mouth felt really odd to me. And this is the only thing we know about this person. We don't know anything about this character.
We don't know anything about no the two friend characters do not become part of the movie. Like they are not
Yeah, they
in it.
they keep threatening to for the first act and then they just die.
Yep.
Oh, and the even less the three boys who show up to like hang out with the girls, they are on
Right.
screen for about 30 seconds and you only see one of their corpses.
Right?
It's super
Corpses
random.
cost. Corpses ain't free.
But you have an actor, just have them lie
You
there.
just have the actor just lie there. That's a very good point as well.
Especially when your actor has like he has a mullet as black as pitch. Like you could collect it in Into the Woods for the witch. But yeah, it's every time like these are the moments where it is kind of fainting towards being a slasher movie that it kind of never really commits to.
It feels like and I don't want to get over the top in speculation. It almost is like the pitch to get the thing funded was we're going to do a slasher movie with one of Santa's elves, but at a fairly early point, possibly even prior to making that pitch, Mandel had already decided it was going to be this like conspiracy thriller about incest and Nazis. And it doesn't want to be a film about an elf killing people. Like that's just every time that happens it feels like it's being forced onto the movie more than that's what the movie is. But it also feels like it knows that it has to keep doing that thing in order to justify like its log line. So we do keep getting the elf like popping up to slasher killer people.
Yeah, and in ways that just fully don't gel with the established like motivations and intentions of the elf. It's like, why does he kill the department store Santa?
Right.
You're right. It feels like it is an obligation.
And like that actually is a question. Does the elf kill the department store Santa in order to frame Kirsten?
I don't see how that would help or what.
I don't either.
Yeah, because like the elf, like really, the elf doesn't need to be doing anything because the whole thing is like at midnight on Christmas Eve is when they will conceive the Fourth Reich or whatever.
Right.
And so he could just be chilling in the shadows, just wait, like smoking a cigar and waiting for his moment. But he just needs to kind of wander around murdering people for a couple days.
Exactly. And it's very strange. Like the movie, it's a very strange movie. is my feeling about Elves. But no, it's it's just so hard to figure out what the movie is doing in terms of genre. Like, again, why is the elf in this movie? Why is the elf killing people in this movie? And I get that it's well, he's killing people in this movie because we want to watch a horror movie with dead bodies in it, but it's like it's just so unclear how the horror movie elements mesh with the occult Nazi plot elements.
Yeah, and especially
Right?
because those elements are in a like more conspiracy thriller / action movie. Like in those moments, like you're getting like Dan Haggerty realizing there's dynamite in his car and leaping out as it explodes.
Yes.
Which, first of all, just throw the dynamite out.
Leaping out of a car as it explodes is so much cooler, though.
It is so much cooler. But yeah, there's that, and then him just kind of harassing professors while they're eating their Christmas Eve dinner so he can learn about the Nazi elf lore. Like they really come from a completely different movie than any of the early elf nonsense.
Exactly. And again, I assume maybe they had the elf prop and they retrofit a script that already existed, but I don't know. It's all very strange to me. Again, late 80s direct-to-video horror. This is the Wild West. Like,
Oh yeah,
it's where movies are just nutsoid bullshit made for like whatever the producer could find in his pockets at the time. So like we don't go to these movies expecting coherence. We don't go to these movies expecting quality, certainly.
but it's more fun if you do, and then you don't get it.
That's fair. That's fair. And again, to be very fair to Elves, it is an arresting experience. Like you are gonna gawk at it for a while.
Yeah, it is just it is totally an experience that I recommend having if you have the stomach for some of the like grosser elements. But like if you have a enough of a grindhouse exploitation background, like it's pretty wild fun stuff.
To be clear, the grossness is all sort of like thematic.
Yeah, you're right.
It's not a very violent movie. I don't actually think we see any nudity. It's not like over the top in terms of content. It's just over the top in terms of like a feeling of moral filth.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. Like, and you're right. The threat of rape is kind of a cloud over the film, but it's not something you actually see depicted on screen.
There's no actual sexual violence in the film.
I don't think there's no sex in the film.
Well, there's the scene where the brother pervs on the sister, but again, we don't see anything. And
yeah.
It's certainly not a sex scene because even the filmmakers aren't going to go there.
Exactly. Wait, so who's the brother's father, Tim?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Something to think about. I also have a question. What do you take, like, what's your takeaway from the closing credits, which roll over this kind of elf fetus?
I mean, I think we're certainly meant to understand that she was impregnated by the elf.
But when?
But that didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't.
The narrative of the film is built around that not happening. So maybe it was elf parthenogenesis. I don't know.
Maybe it was. Oh my god. Okay, so yeah, this movie it is a constant roller coaster of just throwing everything at the wall, and almost none of it sticks. But it's fun watching it fall off the wall.
Oh no, totally. And it's not a safe movie in a way. Like it's swinging. It every single time it's at bat, it wants to hit a home run. It swings as hard as it can. It never connects with the ball, but it's enthusiastic as hell.
Yeah, and Dan Haggerty does lend kind of a sheen of fun to it, if not like full on quality.
Right. Because I mean, God love Dan Haggerty. He's not like a good actor, but he does make it feel legitimate in a way. And he's also he's aware of the property he's in. He is aware that he's playing sort of dissolute Santa Claus, alcoholic, sad guy. And there's fun to be had with that, especially because, as we said, Dan Haggerty is sort of too generic TV star pretty to feel like a down on his luck guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I haven't seen any of his Grizzly Adams work, but it is a kind of a gorgeous situation he's got going on up top.
Oh yeah. No, that I haven't seen much Grizzly Adams either, but I feel like that was sort of what Dan Haggerty's thing was.
Mm-hmm.
Was he had that just impressive hair.
I mean, look, you got to work with what you got.
Yep.
It is weird to me though, because when I was researching him, his IMDb, his like top 4 like best known for credits don't include Grizzly Adams.
I don't believe IMDb's best known for includes TV.
Oh.
I'm not sure about that. If that's not the case, I can't explain it.
Yeah, I will look up Courtney Cox and see. Just do a little test. But I thought it did. No, it has Friends for her.
No,
but I mean,
all
that's
right,
a
then.
bigger. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but what else was Dan Haggerty in bigger than Grizzly Adams though?
Exactly. Because Elves is listed above Grizzly Adams, and I'm like, I don't think so.
That's not true. That's not possible.
Yeah, because that's why he's in Elves.
Right?
Yeah. Anyway, do you have anything else to throw out about Elves before we wrap this one up? Put it under
I
the
mean,
tree?
part of me feels like the only true way to talk about Elves would just to have sort of been to go scene by scene through the screenplay and talk about every beat of it, but
Yeah, perhaps line by line.
potentially. But no, having not taken that approach wisely, because who wants a 4-hour podcast about elves?
Next year we could just do a commentary feature.
We'll just do a watch along. We'll do one of those Roger Ebert style. Every now and then we'll pause it and just discuss the frame in front of us for like 20 minutes of elves.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great.
I would think we should. But no, I mean there's simultaneously so much to talk about, but I feel like if we touch on anything else, it'll just be kind of repeating the things we've already said. So I feel like I'm ready to put Elves to bed.
Yeah, I'm not, but it is time. The needs of the podcast.
If you have any other urgent things you just need to say, or you will feel unsatisfied, please do.
No. Well, actually, you know what? We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the line, "When there's no more room in hell, the elves will walk the earth."
Oh God, I even wrote down that I wanted to mention that, and then I just banished it from my brain because that's almost as bad as the father-grandfather line.
Mm-hmm. So now with that, if you haven't seen Elves and you feel like you can handle it, and I think you can, you should check it out. It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. This movie's free. It's free, which is the exact quantity of money you should pay for it.
Exactly. But yeah, so that is that on Elves. Thank you all for voting for that steaming pile of nonsense. I think it was one of the best case scenarios for what we could have done. Although there was a lot of strong movies this time that I was excited to check out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I've seen it for sure.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe wouldn't have otherwise.
Hard to say. Maybe we wouldn't have finished it. It's hard to say.
Oh my God. But yes, so next in 2 weeks,
we'll get to it when we get to it.
Yeah, the next episode that we're covering, we're gonna be celebrating the 25th anniversary of a Wes Craven feature. It's 1996's Scream, which came out in December, so it's gonna be more or less right on the money. You're not gonna want to miss this episode because Tim and I might not make it out alive.
It is a good thing that we are in different time zones as we record this episode. I think is what's sort of easy to say in advance.
Exactly. It's gonna be a grudge match. I'd make a reference to any sort of MMA fighter, but I don't know them, so that's fine.
Yeah, good enough. But yeah, no, it's gonna be good times.
But yeah, so we'll see you next time for that one. And until then, if you celebrate Christmas, have a very nice one. And yeah.
And if you don't, enjoy the week, the day off.
Yeah. Yeah, and don't try to go anywhere. Like, don't forget it's Christmas and then try to go to the grocery store and it's closed, because that's always a bummer.
Yeah.
Anyway, bye everyone.
Bye.
hate me.